Welcome to the Get a Calm Dog podcast. I'm your host, Jenna. On this podcast, we are taking on the dog training industry and deconstructing what it means to, quote, train a dog. In fact, I believe only you are the expert in understanding and caring for your dog, not some magical dog whisperer or all-knowing dog trainer. And with a lot of context and coaching, you can realize your expertise in supporting your dog. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So our next question comes from Christine with Team Gigi. And she said, how might you tell the difference between prey drive activation and reactivity? For example, around small dogs, if the dogs are a trigger for cats versus dogs. So the first part of this question takes a more grand scale on dogs on the whole and dog behavior on the whole of how might you tell the difference between prey drive activation and reactivity. And the first thing I want to look at this is just through a behavior lens. So for a moment, let's just pretend that all dogs are robots and don't have emotions. Okay, which of course is not true. But for a moment, let's just pretend it is. And if we're just looking at behavior alone, and we're looking at the behaviors exhibited, the lunging, the pulling, perhaps the eye stalk, or conversely, it could be the flee response. So hiding underneath the table, crawling up mom's leg. Both of those lenses are heavily correlated to predatory behavior, whether that is that the dog is being the prey, they are being hunted, or they are the hunter. So if we just take a behavior lens alone and we look at the reactivity of a dog lunging at a trigger or a dog barking at a trigger, a dog running away from a trigger, crawling up mom's legs, going into the other room. That has everything to do with the essential needs of any animal, which is that A, I need to find and hunt, animals to feed, to eat. And B, I need to make sure that the things that are chasing me are not near me and I am safe. So it comes from those two essential needs of am I safe? Am I fed? Do I have water? Behavior is always going to be tied back to that. So if we just take the simple question of what is the difference between prey drive and activation and reactivity, I think it warrants saying that there is no difference. They're exactly the same. Now, having said all of that, of course, animals do have emotions. And they are not just robots that just do behaviors for the purpose of staying alive. So if we take into account emotions, then the argument is that the difference is simply the emotions motivating the behavior. So in the case of prey drive, the emotion is A, fun, B, I want to kill that thing and eventually eat it. Whereas with reactivity, the motivation could be I like that thing is fun. I want to play with it. I want to have a social interaction with it. Or perhaps it could be fear-based, such that the animal's trying to build distance away from the trigger. And when we say that an animal is trying to build different distance, that doesn't always inherently mean that the behavior we see is the dog walking away or running away from the trigger. Indeed, dogs will lunge and attack a trigger with the intent of building distance with that trigger, right? And it is usually, we call it the fight response. The fight response is often going to be elicited when flight or freeze do not seem like viable options for one reason or another. So when we look at reactivity versus prey, the difference is the emotions motivating the behavior or the intent motivating the behavior. Now, if we take the second part of this question, which is how do we tell the difference of reactivity for small dogs where a dog is looking at, for example, a small breed white mini poodle and saying, hey, you look like a bunny rabbit, or looking at cats and saying, hey, you look like a fun little piece of prey that I would love to, have my way with. If we're looking at it from a training lens, the first thing that I'm going to assess is what is the prognosis of the recovery. When I say that, what I mean is given a reasonable amount of training and given a healthy information and effective information to this dog, what is the prognosis that we will be able to subdue the ingrained predatory behavior of this dog. If I take it personal and I use my dog for an example, when Max is now passed, when Max was alive, I was very aware that he looked at small white dogs like they were bunny rabbits. And I was very aware that even if I had put in hours and hours and hours and weeks and weeks and months and years of quote unquote training with Max, I would never get to the place where I believed that Max was safe around a small breed white dog, quite frankly. And there are a couple of reasons why this is true. Hey, my friend, what's been your favorite part of this episode so far? Send me a DM or email and let me know. I know we're a tiny but mighty community, which I love, but I'd also love to support as many guardians as we can. So it would really mean a lot to me if you shared this episode with a friend in need or posted about it on your IG stories. We'd really appreciate that. And now let's get back to the episode. The first is that I knew myself and I knew that I had been traumatized, quite frankly, by watching other dogs attack other dogs because of my profession, that I was going to always have my safety mechanisms up. And I would never probably get to a place where I was just going to be like, well, Max is totally fine around a small breed and it is what it is. Given my life experience that have, quite frankly, nothing to do with Max, I probably was never going to be able to, for myself, get to that place. Now, if we take it from Max, it was that I had seen how he interacted with prey when we would be out on our enrichment walks and he would bring me dead squirrels and he would chase rabbits. I was watching that behavior and I understood how difficult it was to get him to disengage if ever I did. And I knew, given an unfortunate circumstance where all of the awful stars aligned and Max was let loose with a small breed dog, things very well probably would have gone down, regardless of the amount of training. And that doesn't speak to, I want to be very clear, that does not speak to a lack of my skill. That does not speak to a lack of my dedication or commitment. That speaks to the 14,000 years of DNA running through Maxwell. It speaks to the fact that he is a Dalmatian who has the entire predatory motor sequence intact. He is one of the oldest breeds around of all of the 370 some breeds. He is a Dalmatian. And his job through artificial selection is quite literally to kill small rodents away from horses. That was what he was bred to do. And if I cannot accept the fact that's what his DNA tells him he is supposed to do, then I am setting myself up for hopelessness. So when I'm looking at an animal or I'm looking at a dog and I'm thinking they have a pretty significant prey drive towards small dogs that look like prey, towards cats, towards squirrels, towards whatever. The first thing that I'm going to assess is what is the likely prognosis of this animal given a healthy amount of education and information and training for that dog. I'm going to look at what is the DNA of that dog? What are the breeds in that dog? I'll be honest, and I'm talking in super generalities here, okay? This is like, I cannot emphasize enough. This is in all capital letters. This is in generalities. If your dog is a purebred dog, especially a purebred whose ancestor's job is to hunt prey, you better be aware that the odds are not in your favor. It would be unprofessional of any trainer to imply that like, oh yeah, this will be no problem. You know, little terrier breeds, we could totally teach them not to catch rats in the walls. It's going to be no problem. It is unethical for a trainer to present it that way, quite frankly, no matter how skilled they are. So I'm going to look at what is the breed of that animal. I'm also going to look at what is the dog in front of me doing in the moment when they are confronted. How hard is it to get that dog to disengage? How hard is it to get that dog to, if I say, please don't look at that thing, and I'm, using metaphorical language here. if I'm asking the dog, please don't look at that thing, and they're like, but I really want to. And then I say, no, I really don't want you to look at that thing. And they say, please. And I say, no, I really don't want you to look at that. And they say, okay, fine, we'll go do this. I have a much higher prognosis in changing that dog's behavior and mindset around prey, or a dog that looks like prey, versus a dog who, quite frankly, like my Maxwell, I would say, hey, I don't want you to look at that thing. And they would just be like, no response whatsoever. They're just like, I know you're speaking. I don't care that you're speaking. I am stalking that thing. I really don't want you to do that. I don't care, Mom. I want that thing. They are showing an absence in their education, not an absence in mine. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Get a Calm Dog podcast. If you did, it would help us tremendously if you subscribed to the show, left a review, and or shared with a friend. You can either post on your Instagram stories, make sure you tag me if you do, or send it directly through an email or a DM straight to a friend, letting them know, hey, this episode really made me think of you. Info on how to work with me and the Dog Liaison team is linked in the description box, or you can go to getacalmdog.com. We look forward to having you in the next episode. Until then, give your dog a treat for me, and we'll talk soon.